anybody recognize this guy? His name is Harold Pinter. He's a Nobel Prize-winning playwright, actor, producer. He's an amazing guy. He was invited to a party. And his response to the party invitation was, "Thanks for inviting me. I would rather die." Some people might call that shade. Some people might call that real talk, and kind of fabulous. I am a huge fan of real talk. And after 15 years as a Latina deep, deep in the trenches of tech, and then 5 years at Barnard, fighting and advocating for women entrepreneurs, I felt like it was time for some real talk, and ideally some real talk for us, by us. Because I don't know about you, but I have never in my entire life opened a book teaching me about how to start and run a business that reflected my experience as a woman, my experience as a Latina, and definitely my experience just as somebody who doesn't have friends and family who can write big fat checks. Fail fast doesn't work. When bankruptcy is very different for you if you don't have a trust fund or family wealth to fall back on. And by the way, that's the dirty little secret with a lot of the big startup successes that they don't tell you when they're constructing their beautiful romantic origin stories. Meanwhile, women are starting more businesses than men. How many of you knew that? Yes. How many of you knew that 8 out of 10 of those women-owned businesses are started by women of color? Yeah, exactly. So I'm looking at those stats and I'm thinking, for fuck's sake, somebody write a book from our perspective. Somebody write a book from the perspective of people who don't have trust funds, who look and live like the rest of us, which is to say, the majority. Or as Arlen Hamilton likes to call us, the underestimated. So I did that. It launched a couple of weeks ago and it's called Leapfrog, the New Revolution for Women Entrepreneurs. And it's full of stories of entrepreneurs that have done it their own way. Entrepreneurs who are basically killing the entrepreneurship game, who are figuring out how to take, launch, and grow their startups, but doing it their own way, not using the rules of the Silicon Valley bros, like Nina Vaca. Nina Vaca is an Ecuadorian immigrant, just like me, and she proves once and for all that venture capital is not the only game in town. In fact, her company this year is slated to hit $1 billion in revenues, and she is officially the fastest growing woman-owned company in the United States. Yes, please, Nina Vaca. And so for those VCs that would tell you that the only way to grow your business and the only way to do it fast is to give up your business or a significant chunk of it to them and to focus and obsess on some sort of a quick exit, be it an IPO or an acquisition, Nina and I say, bite me. Speaking of exits, I want to show you an alternative. How many of you are familiar with Hanky Panky, the brand? High-end lingerie, yes, some of you may be even wearing some today. This is Lita and Gail. They're the founders of Hanky Panky. And in November, they gathered 170 of their employees, their entire staff, at their factory in Jamaica, Queens. And they gathered them to celebrate their 40th anniversary, but also to announce their exit. Not an IPO, not an acquisition. What they announced was an employee stock ownership plan, which is to say they got together 170 of their employees, some of whom have worked with them for decades, and told them that they were handing the company ownership to them. And then there's people like Travian Shorters. He's a startup veteran, and in the book, he describes the first woman to run a bank in the United States. Does anybody know who she is? Okay, she preceded the 19th Amendment. She preceded the first woman to be elected into Congress, and she even long preceded the Civil Rights Movement. And because it's important to say their names, her name is Maggie Lena Walker, and the year was 1902. So now Travian is in the business of lifting up people like Chris Wilson, also in the book. Chris Wilson is a returning citizen who, as a minor, was given natural life in prison. He served 17 years, got out, moved to Baltimore, started 2 companies that only employ formerly incarcerated men and women. He won the Presidential Medal of Service from Barack Obama, and then a few months ago sold his memoir to Random House, which is slated to publish in February. Chris gives us tools and specific tactics to succeed in his case when you literally have less than nothing. And then there's Don Ray Vaughan. Don Ray Vaughan is an investor that focuses on debt, and he will blow your mind when you talk about debt with him, because what he's seeing is that if we are successful at doing what many of us are trying to do, getting VC into the hands of women and people of color, then what's going to happen, and both of us worry about this because we kind of see how this movie's going to end, is you're going to have women and people of color finally getting their hands on venture capital, but nobody is talking to them about debt. Nobody is talking about the fact that no business succeeds unless you have a balanced capital stack, which usually involves some sort of debt. Good debt. The kind of debt that allows you to buy equipment without giving up a chunk of your company, and the kind of debt, like a line of credit, that'll help you get through some of those tough times when you know you have to barely eke by and make payroll. And if we don't do that, we're going to have a whole generation of women-owned and people of color-owned business that have unbalanced capital stack, and that, by the way, is the definition of how businesses fail. So fast forward 5 to 10 years from now, some clever analyst is going to do a study about women-led businesses, and they're going to see that they have a higher rate of failure. And what do you think they're going to blame? An unbalanced capital stack? No. The World Economic Forum says that it's going to take 170 years to get to gender parity. 170 years. So I decided that I wanted to actually name my book Shortcuts. That was my dream. If not the actual word shortcuts as the title, somewhere I wanted the word shortcuts in the front cover of the book. But we tested the word and it tested poorly. And the reason it tested poorly is because women, especially women of color, we see the word shortcuts and we think cheating. And what concerns me about this is that I think that in my opinion, the reason we equate it that way is because we are so used to being surrounded by isms that are ready to tell us that the only reason we got this role is because of affirmative action, or the only reason we're in this room is because somebody decided to make us the token woman in the room, that we are almost collectively traumatized by this, and we think that the only way to survive is to be perfect. And yet we forget that anybody with power, influence, and capital got there because they took shortcuts. And even if their shortcut wasn't a trust fund, even if their shortcut was simply the good luck of not having been born in the south side of Chicago, it's still a shortcut. So my message really is just that we need to change the system. There is no question that we must change the system, and it's amazing to be on a stage like this surrounded by people who are doing exactly that. But right now, today, we have to make lemonade out of the lemons that we have, and that means creating our own shortcuts. Because 170 years is horseshit. You know this, I know this, thank you. We owe it to everyone that's gonna come after us to leapfrog the hell out of the system that is seemingly in love with locking us out. That is a very horrible photo of Bob Bland being arrested 2 weeks ago at the Supreme Court. And because everything that we do and everything that we are intersects, our entrepreneurship is political, much like apparently our ovaries. So although it's a business book, I put Bob Bland on the back cover of the book, and I put the former president of Planned Parenthood on the front cover of the book. And then I asked, who was on stage a little bit ago, Kimberly Bryant, to do me the honor of writing the foreword of the book, because we're all connected. And we need the world to see these stories and to hear the stories of these women and to know that we are a united front, whether we are the founders of nonprofits, whether we're activists or founders of for-profits. We are together. So here's my ask. I wish I could bottle the courage in this room and on this stage, but I can't. So the next best thing is I want us to embrace the shortcut. I want us actually to insist on it, to demand it. And then I want you to tell the world. Because at the end of the day, the world needs to hear your stories, your leapfrogs. We need your courage to stand up to anybody that would have us play small, especially VCs. Thank you.